All right, we're back for episode 2 of whatever the heck this is, and today we're going to escape into some mine shafts, learn how to steal from a Moogle, meet this game's version of Indiana Jones, meet this game's version of Luke Skywalker's The Joker, experience arson, and commit some arson on some Magitech armors. It should be a wild ride. The back door leads out onto one of the catwalks you saw earlier. Follow it west until you reach the mine entrance in the cliff. You'll be spotted by troops as you cross the street. Just keep going. As in the earlier segment, the mine isn't too elaborate. There's just one main path to follow, though you'll want to pop into the occasional side rooms to collect the healing supplies from chests. Unfortunately, that one path is a dead end. As Tara approaches the exit, she's surrounded by troops and backed into a corner. The floor gives way and leaves her unconscious on a lower level. And it's here, in a dream, that her memory really begins to flood back. Kefka, with his strange laugh, the death of a soldier at her magic-throwing hands, Emperor Gestalt, and his conspiracy to revive magic. Then, blackness. You know, when I was a kid, I really thought this sort of writing was very impressive. I now know, as an adult, having done a lifetime of reading, that this is pretty typical sort of techniques for creative writing, but I hadn't read much like that, so it really blew my mind about something that I thought was so silly and excessive, so losery, like video games, that somebody would write like this about that. Tara needs help, and help is on the way. Back in Narsh, the old man has another visitor, a defensive but good-hearted relic hunter named Locke. At first, he's not much inclined to get involved. Tara's got a bad rap as an Imperial witch, but the old man explains that Imperial troops are chasing her and that Narsh can't stand alone. Narsh is going to have to join up with an underground resistance known as the Returners. He sends Locke out with instructions to find Tara, and then head south to Figaro to meet with the king. You know, after I played this game, I named like every club that I made as a kid, and every time a video game would ask me to name some sort of organization, the Returners, sometimes having to get quite creative with the dropping of the vowels, because games back then wouldn't let you enter a name that long, and a lot of things for, pretty much for the entirety of the years between then and now. So it's just such a good name for an organization, the Returners. I like it. I wonder if that's is that an Avengers reference? Maybe it's an Avengers reference. I don't know. Locke arrives just as a company of troopers appears south of Tara's location. That sounds a bit grim, but things could be worse. For one thing, a gang of little Moogles turns up out of nowhere and signs on to help Locke. And for another, there's a little maze between the fallen Tara and the troops. That buys you some time. So a few times, Final Fantasy VI is going to step out and use these little mini games, and they're very different from anything that had ever been done in a JRPG up to this point that I had played anyway. And maybe putting this so early in the game implies that these are going to be a bigger deal than they really are. They really only do this one or two other times, but it still was very cool, very effective way to open the game. In this little game within the game, the party must bump off the troop leader at the south end of the maze before his men reach Tara at the north end. It's not very difficult, and there are a number of ways to do it. You are given control over 3 separate parties of Moogles, one of them accompanied by Locke. Use one party to drive a hole through the Imperial troops. Use Locke's party to take advantage of the hole and do the actual fighting with the Marshal. Keep the third party back to block the final tunnel to Tara in case the troops break through. The Marshal's no butterball either, so call in the Moogle's dance talents to put him down hard. I think there's a lot of bad advice here, which is funny. First of all, he tells you should use Locke's party to fight the boss, but then you should also use the Moogle's dance, which only Mog can do, and Locke and Mog are not in the same party. I think you could take on the boss with either Mog's party or Locke's and do fine. Mog's party is actually probably the strongest one, although I wouldn't actually use Dance because he hits for like 3 times as much damage as anybody else. One trick you can do if you do before the boss is you can strip all of the gear off of Mog, and he's got a better lance than Edgar will come with. And I think you'll notice in my playthrough I didn't bother to do that because, let's be totally honest, you should never be using the attack command with Edgar anyway, so we'll get to that. Locke is Tara's rescuer. He considers himself a treasure hunter, but people keep calling him a thief. You wouldn't like it either. Specialty, steal/capture. Once you've succeeded, you'll be on autopilot for a bit as Locke carries Tara off to the mine exit and she finally comes around. Locke valiantly offers his services until Tara recovers her memory and he drops a hint. Remember this secret mine entrance. You'll need it soon enough. Which is actually very clever because we are actually going to have to use that knowledge in a couple of hours. And that leaves us at the entrance to Narsh. The town itself is off limits for now. Passing the gate immediately excites the interest of Imperial troops still on the hunt. But do spend the time to visit the school on the outskirts for an education on the basic ins and outs of FF3. It's not just good advice, it's fun. Talk to everyone and be sure to make use of the save point behind the first door and the water in the foyer to restore your hit points and magic points. You'd also do well to search pots and chests for useful items. But also be prepared for the unexpected. One of them is a monster in a box. It's like a jack-in-the-box with hit points and a bad attitude. It's like, one of these just dreadful jokes. I love this. Final Fantasy IV had one of these too, I think, and 6 has this bizarre sort of shoehorned school you can go into with all these dudes dressed in the exact same outfit, and they just speak to you, breaking the fourth wall altogether, telling you which buttons to push for which thing, which I liked. Final Fantasy VII was the first game, I think, to integrate this into the story in an interesting way. If you remember in FF7, you go to this room and there's a bunch of sort of rookie young people in there, and Cloud, being the cool, experienced ex-soldier, is the one who does the explaining of all of the tips and tricks to everybody in the room. That was very clever. That was the first game, I think, to do a better job of integrating it. But most Final Fantasies do have these older Final Fantasies anyway have these little schools in the beginning. All right, this next section is Figaro, which is a opera reference I certainly didn't get when I was 8. Leaving Narsh brings you to the world map for the first time. You're at the northern end of a long north-south valley, so there's just one way to go. Follow the line of the mountains to the west and head south until you reach a desert. Then head west just until you clear the northern hump. Then go straight south. You should quickly see a castle dead ahead. If you lose your bearings in this section, stay mainly in the plain until you figure out where you are. The enemies there are easier to beat than the desert creatures. Just enter the main door and head straight through the palace to the throne room. You're free to explore a bit on your way in, but there will be plenty of time for that later, and it's impolite to keep a sovereign waiting. Edgar is the king of Figaro, a master of machines and a pursuer of women. Specialty, tools. Well, Edgar has the title all right, but right now he's not acting very kingly. He's checking Tara out. The king's a serious flirt. Then he turns his back on her. Then he starts going on about her beauty. Yikes, maybe King Edgar should get out more often. I like this because the author is absolutely roasting Edgar for, I think, what was meant to be funny, acceptable sexism here. It's very progressive. Very progressive. Tools chart. Edgar's a machine man, so he's naturally good with tools. This is a little bit of a weakness of Edgar as a character. I don't know what he's supposed to be. He's a king. He uses tools. He's a mechanic. He kind of feels a little bit like a dumpster. Like they just sort of dumped all this stuff on these mechanics on him because they didn't know what else to do with him. So, I mean, I guess it has to, like, this steampunky castle that can, spoilers, turn into a weird car thing. I guess that's what it's supposed to be. I don't know. That's why the shop in Figaro Castle is the main source of these items. However, 2 of the best are well hidden away in the recesses of the game. So there's going to be a time for this. They're going to have these. The author will include these lists of items and spells and things. And unless there's something worth mentioning, I'll probably just skip over them. At any rate, he and Locke eventually leave Tara alone, and she's free to do some checking out herself. The 2 doors in the room just before the throne room lead up to a chest and a view at the top of the tower, and while you probably missed them on the way in, the hard-to-see doors in the southern half of this room open into 2 shops. Locke's already the proud owner of an auto crossbow. That's another typo. I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be Edgar. There's a lot of typos in there, which will be in use virtually the whole game. And be sure to collect a noise blaster and bioblaster at the eastern shop and see what you might need in the way of healing supplies at the western one. You probably haven't run across Echo Screen, Tent, or Tincture yet. Tincture, the drink of wizards, is especially valuable because it allows you to restore 50 MP at any point. Be sure to check those free sample chests in the back too. Heading south again, you're back in the open air. If you bear west through the door, you'll find a room where you can take a nap to recover any lost hit points and magic points, and learn a bit more about Edgar's woman chasing. You'll also find a down staircase that leads back out to the sand in the castle's western wing. Have a chat with the matron, who'll bring you up to speed on Edgar's missing brother, Sabin. After his father's death, he fled the palace in distaste over the succession process. For a laugh, talk to the hyperactive little girl who's running around the room. At the rear of the room, take the up staircase to the roof and chat with the guard there. I love this up staircase and down staircase. That's a very 90s video game terminology feeling thing. I love that. At the rear of the room, take the up staircase to the roof and chat with the guard there. Edgar's been going on about his alliance with the Empire, but this soldier reports Imperial aggression on the southern continent and says it can't be long before the fighting comes north. While you're touring the grounds, you might as well stop in the East Wing, most easily reached from the west by detouring behind the castle. I didn't even know you could do that. It's pretty much empty. This will be your room, but chat with the rooftop guard. He'll mention South Figaro. If you took a more eastern route to Figaro and checked out the tunnel entrance in the eastern mountains, chances are you've heard that name before. It's your next stop. Head back into the castle again via the door closest to the east wing, and you'll arrive in an oddly familiar room. It's the library where the matron's anecdote about Edgar and Sabin was played out. But do take a moment to chat with the two librarians. They'll fill you in with a touch more info on magic. Just for fun, pop into the foyer and down the right-hand stairs to visit the dungeon, where you can hear the imprisoned thieves gripe about their condition. The left-hand stairs ultimately lead down to the castle's engine room. That's off limits until the second half of the game, but if you go down one flight, you'll receive a tantalizing hint from the attendant. We're ready to leave at a moment's notice. And now you've seen pretty much what there is to see. Edgar's back in the throne room again, but no sooner do you speak to him than word comes of a visitor, Kefka. Kefka is Gestal's right-hand man and the main bad guy in FF3. This monster is evil and crazy, but at least he has a sense of humor. Love this Yoshitaka Amano art. I feel like Amano was having a real good time with Kefka. All of his images of Kefka are fantastic. Just fantastically weird and bizarre and fitting for the character. So much of our impression of what these characters were like and what their personalities were came from this Amano art, which was by far the most expressive examples of these characters that existed. It's hard to overstate how important they were to the telling of the story and the characterization of these characters. Remember Terra's dream in the mines? Same guy. He's already ticked off about having to trek out to Edgar's castle, not to mention the sand in his boots, and Edgar's not going to make him happier with evasive answers about Terra's whereabouts. The king heads off to meet with his chancellor. They know trouble is coming, and Locke takes Terra to her room in the East Wing. This gives him another opportunity to act defensive about being called a thief. That's treasure hunter. As well as a chance to reveal Edgar's true allegiances to the Returners, his own role as liaison between the king and the Resistance, and the role of the old man in Narsh. Ties things up neatly, yes? Not quite. Terra's still confused. On one hand, she's an Imperial officer. On the other, she was being manipulated by her employer. And on the other, hey, that's three hands. She still doesn't know who she is, and she's going to have to make a decision anyway. Right now, though, she's going to make another escape. Edgar wakes up in the night to find the castle in flames and guards running around like madmen. It's Kefka's work, naturally, but the king's not caught totally off balance. Castle Figaro draws in its wings and vanishes into the sand. So that's what the engine room is for. And Edgar, Locke, and Terra take off on Chocobo back for South Figaro. Imperial troops are in hot pursuit. More on Chocobos a bit later. The troop catch up to the party quickly. There's no way to avoid it. You might be worried that being on the receiving end of Magitech weapons won't be such a nice thing. But the battle that follows is almost comic relief if Terra calls in her magic. Whether she does so now or later, it will draw the same awestruck reaction. Edgar and Locke know a good thing when they see it, and they offer to introduce her to Returner leader Bannon. Perhaps she can at once help the Resistance and understand her own power. That's a good place to stop here for this episode, and we'll continue along again sometime soon. So if you're enjoying these episodes, share them, use the like button, use the comment button, subscribe, share it on social media. I'm having a lot of fun with this. There is a larger point that I want to get to with this. I do want to say something with this series about something. A little bit of, as a friend of mine on a Discord said recently, this is maybe an example of an autoethnography, if I want to fit this into the theme of anthropology and archaeology. And I think to some extent it is. The goal of this is not just to read this book or talk about this game, but to think about growth and change and life through the lens of this game, which is in many ways what archaeogaming is about too. Alright everybody, thanks.